1976, and the British Olympic team returns from Montreal quietly, without fanfare. The public are disappointed. The sports writers ask what's wrong with us. And bronze medalist Brendan Foster gives them the short answer. You get what you pay for.
People don't really understand what it's all about, you know. We've got amateur athletes, at least they got there, and they're competing against almost professionals like the Poles and the East Germans.
And the Soviet Union, 1, 2, and 3. And if heading the unofficial medal table were the Soviet Union, closely followed by East Germany, the big surprise of the Games was Cuba. Arriving at Havana airport, they're given a hero's welcome. Dr. Fidel Castro, the president himself, is there to greet them. Our athletes, he says, are the children of our revolution, and at the same time its standard bearers. They are indeed a symbol of Cuba's 17 years of hard revolutionary struggle. In those years, this small island, its population no larger than that of London, has moved from 53rd to 8th place in the Olympic medal table. Today, among the developing nations, it stands alone. Alberto Juantarena, the first man in Olympic history to win a gold in both the 400 and 800 meters. He was 9 at the time of the Cuban Revolution. Teófilo Stevenson was 8. Today, he is the first man in Olympic history to win the heavyweight boxing title twice. They are the spearhead of an extraordinary explosion of athletic talent. What has made this possible? Well, for a start, the Caribbean has never been short on natural talent. Then, of course, it's an area with a superb all-year-round climate. Now, what has transformed this situation is the grafting on of perhaps the best and most exacting training regime in the world, that of Russia and the East European countries. It's a potent combination. But there is another factor, and that is motivation. And that was something I only really understood when I went to Cuba to see for myself. To excel, to be the very best, is something for which there is a deep psychological and political need in this country. To understand that, you must understand Cuba's past, a history of colonialism and of slavery common to the whole Caribbean, which has left deep scars. Spain was the colonial power, and the commodity it needed was sugar. But around the turn of the century, the United States intervened. Cuba developed all right, but it left a lot of people behind. And more important, it left them without pride. Being a good investment for mafia money or a playground for the North American rich provoked a sense of anger and humiliation. They've changed the name now of the Hilton Hotel in Havana. Today it's the Havana Libre, and Cubans don't feel so overwhelmed by their mighty neighbors 90 miles to the north. That wasn't the case 20 years ago, under the regime of Fulgencio Batista. Then the patronage of the United States seemed secure for a long time to come. Certainly few imagined that a small band of men and women up in the Sierra Maestra, led by a little-known but well-connected young lawyer called Fidel Castro, would not only change the course of Cuban history, but fire the imagination of the world. It seems a long time ago now, And those men with Fidel have gone their different ways. Camilo Cienfuegos, killed in an air crash. Ernesto Che Guevara, shot in Bolivia. And Raul Castro, Fidel's brother, now Minister of Defense in the new Cuba. That small band of Fidelistas has grown into a national government that is now firmly Marxist, firmly aligned to Russia and the communist world, and unequivocally in command of the country. Pull aside the palm trees and you could be in Red Square. The young idealists of the Sierra Maestra, who talked then of democracy and freedom, are older now. They used to call them Los Barbudos, the bearded ones. Today, Cuba is strictly a short back and side society, and the only beards you're likely to see are on patriotic posters or in government. I wonder, looking at this photo of Fidel Castro as he entered Havana in 1959, exhausted and triumphant, whether he knew what lay ahead, that the road of permanent revolution was going to be hard and austere, and to succeed required the creation of El Nuevo Hombre, the new man, the sort of citizen who would put community before self, state before family. The lottery mentality would have to give place to an indoctrinated nationalism, and essential to this were two things: education and sport. Cuba's main sports magazine is subtitled Derecho del Pueblo, the right of the people, and that's how it is. Cuba is not a rich country, and like Britain or anywhere else, it is short of old people's homes and roads and hospitals. But while we put sport and recreation low on our list of priorities, the socialist countries have never done so. And Cuba is no exception. Its investment in sport is excessive or impressive, depending on your point of view. But if there is one motivating factor where Cuba is different from all other socialist countries, it's in the charismatic leadership of Fidel Castro himself. A former international baseball and basketball player, he never misses an opportunity to involve himself, to take off his jacket, so to speak. And as a man never known to be short of words, he has himself enunciated Cuba's philosophy of sport. I talked about the president to the man they call the godfather of Cuban sport, Fabio Ruiz, Deputy Director of INDA, Cuba's controlling sports body.
I don't want to be any chauvinist about this, but we are very proud that our chief of state practices baseball, basketball. We even participate in an official tournament in 1968 where he participated. And he's the one who has always encouraged us about not only the winning of medals. He sees it as a consequence of the development of physical education and sport as a part of the integral education of our youth.
That education begins at birth, or to be more precise, 45 days old. Because it's at that very early age, the authorities will encourage mothers to start gently exercising and massaging their babies, and later, long before they start school, to prepare their children with simple basic activities for gymnastics. Of course, they're doing nothing that wouldn't happen in a playgroup in this country. But while we tend to do it simply for fun, and some may argue in a rather aimless way, in Cuba, it's orientated to a specific objective, starting the child on the first step of the ladder to sports competition. Next is the parents' turn. One mother keeps the children happy with a story, while others do their own workout. This is on a new housing project in the suburbs, but today you might find this anywhere in Cuba.
Dice el perrito, yo, wow, 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 señor, no, que me asusta. Miau, miau. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And I must say, I found it admirable. Here, for instance, housewives of all ages, and let it be said, not all with trim figures, weren't at all embarrassed about exercising in Havana's famous Jose Marti Park.
En el taller enorme, en el jardín, en la pequeña tienda, en la escuela, en el campo, en la guardia, una noche cualquiera, para nada inferior, imprescindible compañera, presente está la mujer.
Sport, the right of the people, and they really do mean that, whether it's for participants or spectators. Spectator sport may simply be a question of watching on television. But if you want the live event, you just turn up at the stadium. All sport in Cuba is free. First come, first served. No ticket touts, no entrance fees, no entrepreneurs, and no under-the-counter payments. The Cubans are the world champions at baseball, and Havana prides itself on one of the finest stadiums in the Americas. This, though, isn't it. This is the baseball pitch of Havana's Mental Institute, and both the spectators and the players are all long-stay patients. While we in Britain justly pride ourselves in the role of sport for the physically handicapped, Cuba has extended this to include the mentally handicapped. And what is of particular interest is that all play is based on competition. And that brings me to a fundamental difference between the Cubans and ourselves. In Britain, with our philosophy of sport for all, the emphasis is largely on recreation. In Cuba, it's on competition. And, as in sport, so in education generally, competition and the stress on achievement is absolutely fundamental. In Cuba, everyone works or studies. Indeed, not to be engaged in one or other of these activities is an offence against the state. And in one area at least, it seems to have achieved results. A drop in illiteracy from 30 to 4% in 18 years is something that any nation would be proud of. To see this educational system in practice, I went first to Santiago, second city of Cuba and capital of Oriente province, from where so many of Cuba's finest athletes come. It is known as the heroic city. It was here in 1954 that the young Fidel Castro, not long out of university, launched a reckless attack on Batista's soldiers in the Moncada barracks. Most of the attackers were captured, interrogated, and tortured. It was early days, and they were inexperienced and ill-organized. There were killings on both sides. Fidel, with brother Raul, escaped only to be subsequently captured, tried, and condemned to 15 years imprisonment. Dismissed as adventurism by Cuba's official Communist Party, it foreshadowed the revolution to come. The Moncada barracks is now a museum. Nearby, there is a new building, one of Cuba's schools of sporting excellence. Amongst the sports this particular school specializes in is boxing. Bernardo Chacon, who is 18, has been selected to study here because this is what he's good at. Eventually, he hopes to specialize in sports medicine. Now, this is something I found most interesting. Here is a young man who, on the basis of merit, is having the privilege of a superior education in a selective school. It is usually assumed in an aspiring egalitarian society that the talented would be put with the less talented, so that the general level could be raised. But in Cuba, as in the Eastern Bloc countries, it doesn't work like that. The best students are selected and put with the best teachers, the best athletes with the best coaches. And it starts at an early age. How else can one develop an Olga Korbut or Nadia Comaneci? For Bernardo Chacon, his sport is not at the expense of his academic work. It is merely complementary. To qualify for one of these schools, you must excel both intellectually and physically. It's often difficult to get across to people in the West that for every student in a Cuban school or university, physical education is obligatory. So although Bernardo may be privileged, even to the point of having extra food, in a country that is severely rationed, he has to earn it. Now, it may seem I'm being contentious, but these schools of excellence seem to me to have less in common with our comprehensive schools and more in common with the educational precepts of an earlier period. I'm thinking of eminent Victorians like Thomas Arnold, headmaster of Rugby School, who inspired the Baron de Coubertin, founder of the modern Olympic Games, during that era of muscular Christianity. There's also another parallel with the British public schools, and I tackled Fabio Ruiz about this. You are practicing a form of elitism, surely?
Well, I don't think so. You see, they really, in the very grassroots level, as you call it, they mix. They work together there in the base. But after they go to a higher level is when we separate those people, because we don't have enough coaches of high level, we don't have enough trainers, enough physical education teachers to keep on going with all that big mass. It's really impossible to do that. Otherwise, if you keep that, the best coaches with the worst participants, you are wasting your quality.
To the south of mainland Cuba is the Isle of Pines, where Fidel Castro and his colleagues were imprisoned after their abortive attack on the Moncada barracks. Fidel's sentence was 15 years, but after less than 2 years, as part of a general amnesty, they were all released. Today, the authorities have symbolically removed the iron bars, turned the prison into a museum, and keep their political prisoners elsewhere. Today, they have renamed the island the Isle of Youth, and the 14th of June School is just one of some 30 schools of excellence that have been established here since the revolution. Around the school are acres of citrus groves, and this is another interesting aspect of the Cuban way of education. Maria Chirino is 16, and like everyone else here, she does 2 hours manual work daily, in addition to her 4 hours of study and 3 hours of specialist sport activity. She's lucky though. Not all students work in the sunshine of the citrus groves. They may as easily be on a factory line packing boxes. Nobody pretends this is vocational training. It is, quite simply, part of the national effort. The state has made a giant investment in education, and this is one way in which the student can give something in return. Myself, I think it makes sense when a country is poor or has its back to the war. It reminded me a bit of the East End hopping camps before the Second World War. And I was relieved to see that kids being kids, the work wasn't always taken that seriously. All the schools on the Isle of Pines are residential. And in a country where traditionally family ties are very close, not all parents are happy about this. But most children go home at weekends by special ferry. Each School of Excellence specializes in a particular sport, rather than duplicating facilities. Here at Maria's school, it's canoeing.
Mira el puño, mira el frente, mira el puño. Vista fija aquí, siempre en el puño. No el brazo aquí.
Maria says she likes dancing, movies, and collecting butterflies.
Ángulo 90 grados.
I asked her where she would like to see improvements in the school. She said more activity and, interestingly, more discipline from the teachers. She says, though, she's very happy. And if I were a youngster growing up, remembering my own love of sport, I can't think of a much better way of life. But if you are academically brilliant and quite hopeless at physical activities, what then? Well, the Cubans have thoughtfully stretched their definitions somewhat. Chess is included amongst Cuba's official sports. But those who are athletic and want to make a career of it move on to the Higher Institute of Physical Education, the equivalent of our Loughborough College. Here you will find the best talent in the country, not just at the institute itself, but all around it, because it's situated in the massive sports city, the Ciudad Deportiva, a complex that concentrates most of the facilities required for Cuba's national teams. This, for instance, is the national water polo squad. What a wealth of talent there is too. And the reason is simple. Cuba has evolved a system of selectivity that throws its net as wide as possible and makes sure that no one slips through. Unlike our colleges of physical education, men and women train together. Watch this dynamic teacher of gymnastics and dance with these mature students. Santiago Trujillo, specializing in gymnastics, has already done 4 years of study, followed by teaching in a secondary school. Now, to get higher qualifications, he is studying for a further 4 years. In other words, at the end, he will be an 8-year trained teacher, or possibly a national coach. I talked with him and another English-speaking student. What other nationalities are here? Because it seems to be, lots of other nationalities.
Well, we have ours, that's first. Then after that, we have, for example, we have from Guinea, we have Mexicans, Peruvians, we have from South Africa.
And one from Guinea.
Green Cade, Guinea-Bissau.
That's Jamaicans?
Jamaicans we have
Jamaicans we have.
And the teaching is all in Spanish?
All in Spanish.
Bernardo Falcon, the other student, is a former national squad soccer player, which emphasizes another point. Each of these students has to be an international or near international athlete to gain entrance, which is certainly not so in Britain. Football is another sport where Cuba is making enormous progress.
The book that you were using to instruct in soccer is a British book.
Yeah, of course. It's the FAY to training and coaching.
By
Alan Wade.
Alan Wade, who's a great old friend of mine in college.
Yes.
He'll be delighted to know. Is this a very good book?
Yes, we think that this is very good and new.
So the British way of soccer has still got something to show the rest of the world.
Yeah. I think that you still have many things to show the rest of the world.
Delta, triángulo, delta, músculo, músculo de tipo triángulo.
Whether capitalism and the West are in decline or not, the Institute is still not averse to using a few leftover relics from the pre-revolutionary days, such as this jukebox. It's linked to a human cadaver and plays back anatomical information instead of music. Next door to the Higher Institute of Physical Education is the Institute of Sports Medicine. In Britain, we've nothing like it, and I must say I was impressed. Its main job is the preparation, well-being and testing of the national teams. Here in the Department of Biomechanics, a young aspiring diver is given a balance test. Another is measured for her degree of peripheral vision, critical in team games like volleyball and basketball. In terms of its medical staff, its investment was staggering. 42 doctors, 6 dentists, 17 physiotherapists, and 17 sports psychologists. I asked these psychologists whether their job was to motivate the athletes. No, they said, that's the coach's responsibility. Our job is to motivate the coaches and tell them what to look for that might affect the athlete's performance. This man is a boxer, and no, he's not having the roof of his mouth removed, though he does look a bit like he thinks he is. This is the first stage of preparing a made-to-measure gum shield. Something that fascinates me is how much all this development is due not just to the revolution, but to the reaction to that revolution by the United States.
When the imperialist blockade came up in 1962, before that, we used to buy most of our sport equipment from United States. Then something unbelievable happened. We have to invent what was invented 100 years ago. We had to invent the machine to make the balls because we didn't even have the chance to have the aid or the help from the socialist countries because they don't practice baseball. And as you know, baseball is our first sport in Cuba. It's the national sport.
Today, Cuba produces the officially accepted baseball for the World Championships.
Que se acaben de marchar, es lo que más nos conviene, que el que menos bultos tiene goza de más claridad. Para la leche que da la vaca, que se la tome el ternero. Para la leche que da la vaca, que se la tome el ternero.
So we start with baseball, and now we have a sport industry, and we are making about $10 million in sports equipment, boxing, fencing, even rowing. So maybe we have to be grateful to the imperialism on the development of our sport industry.
They don't recognize Christmas anymore in Cuba, at least not officially. But they have a holiday all the same. On this occasion, the workers of the sports goods factory had fulfilled their quotas early and had only stayed on so that we could film them. And when this was over, they decided to have a little party. It was quite spontaneous and not for our benefit. We'd already packed up our equipment. But we did film it, because we'd been here a number of weeks now. We had had a chance to get some measure of the Cuba the official guides don't care to talk about.
Y volver, volver, volver a tus brazos otra vez.
We had seen a country that was subdued, careworn, living in hope for tomorrow rather than enjoying today. In that context, this small celebration was strangely moving. Because the problems here are immense. The investment in social and medical welfare, as with sport and education, is on a prodigious scale. The money for this has to come from somewhere, and most of it comes from Russia, to the tune of £1 million a day. In spite of this, life is austere. There is little in the shops except essentials, and these are mainly rationed. Hardest cut of all was last year when the coffee allowance was reduced to 1 ounce per person per week. This in a country that not only loves coffee, but grows it too. Freedom to criticize this state of affairs is strictly limited. Fidel Castro himself has spelt out the ground rules. Within the revolution, everything. Outside the revolution, nothing. And to make sure of that, every village, every street, every block has its own Committee for the Defense of the Revolution.
Con Radio Liberación desde La Habana, Cuba, primer territorio libre en América en el año del 20º aniversario del Granma.
Radio Progreso Cadena Nacional, exactamente.
20 years ago, when Graham Greene was starting his novel, Our Man in Havana, here in the famous Hotel Nacional, the Fidelistas were still in the Sierra Maestra, and Havana's reputation was as a city of corruption, seedy and exotic. Every experienced seaman knew of the famous waterfront they call the Malecon, with its bars and bright lights and beautiful mulatto girls. Now that is all gone, and I don't suppose the average cane cutter or factory worker regrets for one moment its passing. After all, it never was intended for him, any more than was this opulent building in the old part of Havana. Once an exclusive club and casino, today it's used by Cuba's fencers. But if the decadent days have gone, the millennia has not yet arrived. Cubans are painfully aware they have a long way to go. 1 million people left the country after the revolution. Not all of them rich landowners and racketeers. Many were people who had opposed and even fought against Batista, but who subsequently became disillusioned with the direction the revolution was taking. And if this drain of talent justifies the priority given to Cuba's schools of excellence, so the antagonism of the United States has provoked the need for Cuba to prove herself, to find her own distinct identity, and to stand equal with other nations. In this David and Goliath struggle, sport plays an essential role. This is the area in which Cuba knows, given certain conditions, she can excel. And excel she does. This is Pan American champion Margarita Rodriguez. Now, if there is one sport where the rivalry between Cuba and the United States is intense, it's boxing. From way back in the pre-war era, Cuba has always produced tough, wiry fighters. The famous Kid Chocolate was a Cuban, but traditionally, it's been a sport dominated by America. But look around this gymnasium today, and you can see 5 world champions and 4 Olympic gold medalists, and they're all Cuban. Now, I don't claim to be an expert on all sports, but as a former national athletics coach, I do know something about training methods. And what I saw here was a regime that was as thorough and exciting as any I've seen anywhere in the world. Their trainers, Alcides Sagana and Angel Cruz, are both Cuban. Now, a lot of people have attributed Cuba's successes to their Russian and East European coaches, and no doubt about it, they owe them a big debt of gratitude. But in both the Munich and Montreal games, it was these two men who nursed the boxing team to its phenomenal successes. Look how that man sweats. Working out continually in a wetsuit, despite his extra rations, he'll keep down his weight. And although 6 weeks before a fight, there'll be a sharpening up process, at no time of the year are these boxers allowed to get out of condition. No doubt about it, emerging from this training camp, tucked away discreetly in the countryside near Havana, are some of the finest boxers in the world. And towering above them all is one man, Teofilo Stevenson.
So can the American withstand the hard-hitting Stevenson? Round one. And this burly black American coming into the ring with his left eye cut from a previous contest. A little reminiscent of George Foreman, who won the Olympic gold medal at heavyweight in Mexico City in 1968. But with a fast punch that destroys. Stevenson's got him with the right hand, and he staggers over to the ropes, and I don't think his legs allowed him, they won't. Down on the seat of his pants, looking up at the referee and not knowing what's going on. He's counted out in the first round. Stevenson's done it again. And once again, American heavyweight hopes are blasted out of the Olympics by this remarkable Cuban heavyweight, Teofilo Stevenson.
Teofilo Stevenson was born near the sugar factory in the small village of Delicias in Oriente province 25 years ago. His father came to Cuba in 1923 from the island of St. Vincent to find work as a stevedore. Today, he is retired and keeps a cow, a couple of goats, and a few chickens. The house he lives in is his son's and was a gift from the Cuban government in recognition of his services to the state. Teofilo himself isn't often at home. Most of the time he's in Havana, either training or studying, a course in electrical engineering. It's a relaxed, happy household, and like most West Indian families, there's plenty of aunts and cousins and old folk around. But if the family hero is young Teofilo, the boss is still Mr. Teofilo Stevenson Sr. At 76, he can take a long view of how Cuba has changed since the revolution.
It's as far as the east from the west. Those days, comparing with today, there was no help. But today, for instance, my boy, he studies boxing, he reads it, and then he went to the stadium with a boxer he practiced. When he's not training, he comes here, he goes and comes. He lost the first fight, but the return bout with the same fellow, he won it, and he continued fighting. Then the chief or the representative in the province, he came to my home and he spoke to me. He said that my son, he will reach to the top, he's good, but the mother didn't want. He said, no, I don't want my boy to box, they will kill him.
Oh, what a good right uppercut. That's typical of Stevenson's work. That's what we saw in Munich, and that man's not going to get up, believe me. Mamadou Drama of Senegal counted out 58 seconds into the second round.
Throughout his career, Teofilo Stevenson's mother has never seen him fight.
The television, she doesn't look at it. Now, here by radio, she wouldn't listen to it. When the fight is over, well, she looks at the other fight, but not at her son. She doesn't want to see it.
And this is certainly one of Stevenson's off nights with a vengeance. Oh, he's got it, right hand. Oh. As soon as one says that, he produces it. And he's staggering like a drunken man, as so many of Stevenson's opponents do after one punch. Oh. And the towels come in from the Romanian corner. They don't want to see any more. Well, I don't. That is extraordinary. So Stevenson does it again.
Today, in Cuba's first elections since the revolution, Teofilo Stevenson has been chosen to represent his people in the new National Assembly. And since it only sits for 5 days a year, he's now likely to be spending a lot more time back home in Delicias with his constituents.
Buena, perdónenme. ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? ¿Idolita?
Bueno, que tú quieras.
Ah, sí.
Oye, ¿cuál es aquello?
There is no professional sport in Cuba, but for a long time now, American promoters have wanted to see a fight between Stevenson and Muhammad Ali.
Vamos.
Recently, he was offered $1 million to fight various American professionals. His immediate response was, what is $1 million US compared to the love of 8 million Cubans? Resistance to professionalism in sport, at least as they interpret it, runs very deep in Cuba.
We think that a professional sportsman is sort of a merchandise. I mean, you can sell him, you can buy him. It's not part of our philosophy.
The other giant of Cuban sport is the 400 and 800 meters Olympic champion, Alberto Juantarena. In Cuba, land of hurricanes and electric storms, his nickname is White Lightning. Amongst his close friends, though, familiar with his enormous appetite, huge stride length, and massive physique, he's known simply and with affection as El Caballo, the horse.
O sea, el manual de Lomo Noso y el de Humberto Pérez, hay criterios dispares en cuanto al comportamiento del salario real a largo plazo.
Juantarena is reading for a degree in economics at Havana University.
Es de la opinión de que el salario real tiende a disminuir.
He studies from 8 to 1 in the afternoon, when he's taken by chauffeur-driven car to his training. He follows an extremely demanding program, and of course, he's often away for competitions.
It is true that the high-level athletes, they have a very tight program if they are workers, if they are students, to really be good. That is all over the world. What we do is we discuss with the universities and we tell them the technical program for Juantarena is this. How can we match it with his academic program?
What it means in effect is that for athletes like Juantarena or sprinter Silvia Chivas here, there is no disgrace in taking 6 years to read for a 3-year degree, providing they work seriously. Compare this with sports scholarships in America, where athletes are largely exploited and frequently end up with no academic qualifications whatsoever.
La jornada de trabajo, ¿qué pasa con la jornada de trabajo? ¿Disminuye o crece?
Disminuye, ¿no?
Disminuye. ¿Cómo se explicaría, por qué se explicaría esta disminución?
Bueno, creo que porque el capitalista, ¿no?, se va a apropiar de una mayor cantidad de tiempo de trabajo necesario, ¿no? Por esta misma disminución de los medios de la producción.
No, pero ¿qué nos explica a nosotros? ¿Qué nos explica a nosotros la reducción de la jornada de trabajo?
La lucha de clases, ¿no?
La lucha de clases. Entonces, la clase obrera gana en organización. Está bien.
This is Havana's golf course. It's a place, like the famous Tropicana nightclub, that has survived the revolution in spite of its associations. Established many years ago by the expatriate British colony, it still has, believe it or not, a portrait of the Queen hanging in its clubhouse. Alberto Juantarena comes here 3 times a week to train. The basis of excellence in running is, of course, running, mile after mile of it. There's no physiological mystery about this man's phenomenal ability.
If you want to get the victory, that the first thing is training hard and every day. And you must be disciplined. I enjoy working hard because I know that it's the only way that you must get a good time. And I put all my power, all my energy in order to get a good race every time.
Amongst other Cuban athletes, he is recognized as one of their inspirational leaders and spokesmen. Politically, he is totally committed to the revolution. Ask him his proudest moment, and he would tell you, presenting one of his Olympic gold medals to Fidel Castro.
My ambition is to give a revolution that the revolution gives to me. I am a son of revolution. For example, you have in Cuba free education, free health, because the socialist system gives to the people the possibility to live like a human need to live, you know?
Juantarena lives with his wife and her family in a house given to him by the government. Family life for him is extremely important.
All my free time I give to my wife, to my family.
His pride and joy is his 2-year-old daughter, Erita.
Very, very difficult. You said, Erita, don't touch it. Okay. A wash, oh, the lamp, glasses, you get everything in the house. Oh, incredible girl. Turn off television, it's terrible. Never she's quiet, never. Very independent, very chilling.
Buenas. ¿Quién llegó?
¿Cómo está? Un besito. Un besito. ¿Tú no quieres pasar en el elefantico? ¿En qué? ¿Tú no quieres pasar en el elefantico? Sí.
It's not a very private life, sharing with so many relatives. But this doesn't worry him. Like most Cubans, he likes to keep open house. In fact, he's considered really rather privileged to have a house, rather than just an apartment. And of course, in his position, he receives other benefits. The chauffeur-driven car wherever he goes, and along with all other athletes, supplementary rations of food. But whatever his special position in Cuban society, he remains the most modest and friendly of men, frank, open, and totally sincere.
I feel respect, no? Respect for everybody. For example, if a person asks me for a signature, why not? Because I am a normal man, you know? Because I am not the big man and famous man. I don't understand it. Famous in my vocabulary, does that mean nothing?
At Havana's Pedro Marrero Stadium, the warm-up, like anywhere else in the world, is relaxed and good-humored. During the winter, in his build-up for the season, Juantarena works on a 3-day rotation of beach, grass, and track running. Juantarena's Polish coach, Zygmunt Zabieszowski, who guided him to his extraordinary double victory at Montreal, has returned home, and there's no doubt that Juantarena misses him. But he has also established a good relationship with his new Cuban coach, Jorge Cumberbatch.
How long will he rest between sets?
3 minutes.
3 minutes between sets. Yeah, 3 sets, 90 kilograms, 3 minutes rest.
Cumberbatch only looks after Cuba's 400-meter runners, 3 athletes in the morning, and in the afternoons, his sole job is supervising Juantarena's training. And in passing, let me say, Cuba has 37 track and field coaches. In Britain, we have 7. Cuba's present success isn't due to any massive investment in facilities. This, for instance, is their only synthetic track. But to its investment in people, the coaches, the medical backup, and an infrastructure that gives constant encouragement to the athletes themselves. And it seems to work.
The big Cuban's going to make it all the way. And over right out of it, he's not going to be able to get there. And Juantarena holding off the American who's broken. Van Dam trying to get to Volhuta. But Cuba's first ever gold goes to White Lightning, Juantarena. A new world record for the man who is still a baby at the event.
Look at that all-consuming stride length. This man who seems so in command of the opposition that he physically dwarfs them. This man who, after 6 races in 6 days at Montreal, still had speed enough to produce that magnificent 400 meters win.
Once again, Juantarena of Cuba has started so slowly. Bernard caught right up with him, but there goes the power of the Cuban down the back straight. He's really got to cut it back. It's Newhouse, United States. Right up on Jenkins now. And also going well right on the outside is Maxie Parks. And Jenkins already has a lot to do against the Americans. And here comes Juantarena in lane 2. Newhouse leads. Juantarena cutting down on the little American. And Juantarena comes through in lane 2. Newhouse tying up. The Cuban drives for the line. And on his way to a second goal. Goal for Cuba. And so the Cuban achieves something no one else in history has done.
Whatever other reservations I may have about Cuba, and there are many, if I were living in the third world and looking for an identity through sport, certainly Cuba is the country I'd look to. And when it comes to motivation and a sense of purpose, perhaps we can learn something too. In such a short time, what a transformation it has wrought in Cuba. For years, judo was considered a closed shop, the preserve of Japan and 3 or 4 other developed countries. Until Hector Rodriguez came to Montreal and claimed the middleweight gold, surprising everyone but the Cubans themselves. The same with weightlifting, traditionally a stronghold of Bulgaria, East Germany and Russia. And yet here's Vicente Quintana at 17, breaking a world snatch record and becoming Cuba's 2nd junior world record holder. Tradition, too, has decreed that Negroes may make magnificent runners, but they're poor swimmers. Cuba attributes that to a lack of opportunity and, to prove a point, now have the 4th best water polo team in the world.
Segundo grupo.
It was Fabio Ruiz, the godfather of Cuban sport, who suggested to me that this was just the beginning of Cuba's sporting revolution. Give us another 4 years and the inspiration of being in Mother Russia at the 1980 Olympics, and you'll see what I mean.
Vamos rápido, Maura. Vamos, 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 señores, vamos, vamos. Rápido, María.
Watching their women's volleyball team in action, I have a feeling he may just be right.
Vamos a estudiar, tenemos la idea clara, debemos entre nosotros edificar el mañana. Tenemos un mano a mano con nuestra generación y el pueblo nos da las armas para crear y hay que estudiar. Vamos compañeros, se está imponiendo un deber, porque no hay peor ciego que aquel que no quiere ver. Damos un paso adelante haciendo revolución, ligando con el trabajo la educación.